course.
No. I'd rather talk about school reopening, and I'd like to actually talk about vaccines because they were in the news last week.
Oh, okay. Well, What's on your mind?
Well, in terms of vaccines, it appears that we are behind every G7 country. And if you look at some reports, in terms of in the Western world, in terms of when we will actually receive the vaccine. So you've got, Johnson & Johnson has been working with Oxford University in terms of one strain of vaccine. There's, I believe, 243 of them that are being tested in various stages, in various phases throughout the world. And it's only been in the last couple of weeks. We signed one deal, I believe, with Pfizer in early August, but we were banking all our hopes on the NRC having a deal with CanSino, which is a Chinese-based pharmaceutical company funded by the Chinese government through the People's Liberation Army. And so on May 12th, with great fanfare, the Prime Minister announced this deal with the Chinese government to create a vaccine. And China basically then, after that announcement, never approved shipment of the vaccine that we paid for to Canada. So the NRC had to kill the deal. And we also lost months and months in terms of being prepared for a vaccine. And so the issue, so all the countries that have pre-ordered with different companies are going to have access to this vaccine before Canadians do. And I think that is, out of everything we have talked about today on the podcast, that is something that the average Canadian is the most concerned about.
Except it's all horseshit. So let's talk. Like, there are 4 deals that have been struck. Every government in the world is striking multiple deals, hoping that one of the bets they place will come in and be the vaccine on the vaccine platform that will end up being the actual vaccine that works. No one knows what it will be. Dozens of approaches, literally hundreds of various trials going on, and the reality is we've set up 4 deals. We're going to do more bilateral. There may be imperfections to the government's approach, but this idea that we're behind, no one knows when this motherfucking vaccine will ever be discovered. We're not behind on something that is not mandated by date. How can you be behind? When? We're behind?
We entered, so let's say the Johnson & Johnson / Oxford vaccine is the one that...
That's one of the many ones that we're not part of, and many countries aren't part of it. And then other countries... What if one of the 4 that we're in now, or one of the 3 we'll sign the next month that come in?
It's possible, but because we signed...
It's Joker's wild.
Because we signed later than the other countries, we are later in the queue. The companies have said that.
You're saying we've gone to the table and we've played numbers 1 through 9, and you're saying it's ridiculous. We should have been betting on 10 through 15. No one knows. The other thing, by the way, from my perspective, that's like galling about this, there's an international agreement that what we ought to be doing is saying, and in addition to bilateral deals, or saying, look, we have to have equitable access. When we discovered the polio vaccine, right, every government in the world said it is a matter of public good, and I'm not talking about eliminating patents, but it's a matter of public good that we will have a safe, effective, and equitable framework to get that vaccine to where it goes. And that's where the emphasis needs to be. Strike bilateral deals, but ultimately this should be going to frontline healthcare workers first. It should be going to those then who are older first, and it should be happening around the world without regard for means and wealth. And that surely should be, it's a public common good, and we ought to be pursuing it in that basis.
Okay, but we're not talking about means and wealth. We're not talking about third world countries. We're not talking about African countries. We are talking about the fact that we are behind other G7 countries because this government decided to cut a deal with the PRC, with the government of China. I
think that's hyper-partisanship. That's one potential bet
Jenny,
on the
what
table.
are the practical... Jenny, I'm actually not participating in this because I've not followed this at all. Okay? I don't know anything about this.
So Patty Hadju came out and said that it is looking like Canadians will get the vaccine in Q2 of next year. So we're talking about late winter, early spring. Australia has come out and said they're getting it early Q1. So the practical
There is no vaccine. There may not be one by Q1 of 2021. This is like arguing who's going to build a time machine first.
Okay, but if there is, Scott, we are going to be later. Canadians, front healthcare workers, doctors, whoever are going to be later in getting the vaccine because this government dragged their feet in terms of a deal with China.
I just don't think that's I think you're using the China boogeyman and plastering all over this argument.
No,
I don't think it represents reality. I don't think it represents reality. We are like every other G20 country that's striking as many bilateral deals as we can afford, and we're all probably pissing millions of dollars down the drain on bets that won't come in when we could be placing a greater emphasis on collective action through G20, through WHO, and through other international agencies and saying, let's do more there.
Yes, the WHO who praised China's handling of the coronavirus.
Yes, the WHO, which has done more than any other agency in the world to stem this.
From a practical point of view, countries like the US were signing deals with pharmaceutical companies in March and April, and we signed our first one in the first week of August. So from a practical point of view and from a priority of this government, that is where we're at. So we just talked about all these, It
hasn't got anything to do with when you sign the deal. It's when the vaccine is discovered. And what quantities of it are available for distribution.
Is this how it works? Is this how it works, though? So your government has to get your country in line for the vaccine. So we're behind the States or some European countries. Jenny, when the fuck would Costa Rica get the vaccine? Like, how does this work internationally?
Well, it's when they sign deals with the pharmaceutical companies, which are doing the different which are doing a different phase in. So the Johnson & Johnson Oxford one, I believe, is in both phase 2 and phase 3 in terms of clinical trials. So 30,000 people, I believe, are part of clinical trials. So, but the fact of the matter is, let's say the clinical trials work, and they have signed agreements with different countries in terms of when those countries get access to it, it will depend on what the negotiations are. And I am saying that there is going to be no universe where countries that have already signed agreements that gave millions of dollars back in March, April, and May to pharmaceutical companies, there's no chance that any deal we signed with them just last week that we are going to receive a vaccine that could potentially work if there's ever one that works. And I agree with you on that, Scott. But if there is one that works, we will be behind. And I think the implications there are if we are months behind in terms of getting vaccines that we can actually give to Canadians, that's going to put us in a position where economically it could be a flip side. Our borders are not closed to people coming into Canada. We might be in a position where borders around the world are closed to us because we don't have the vaccine yet.
Or our deal with Novavax may come in and we'll find countries that haven't signed deals with them will be way behind us. Or we can highlight the fact that COVAX, which again is through the WHO and 192 countries have signed on to, would actually expand its reach. It's doing deals with squillions of companies so that it can provide $2 billion doses of any vaccine to everybody on an equitable framework. And, we could say, let's place more emphasis on that. I think this discussion... everyone is placing bets, and we have no idea which horse is going to come in.
I'm sufficiently bored by this that I need to move on.
All right, let's move on.